Sometimes the most dangerous spirits are not the ones trying to scare you. They are the ones trying to play and wanting to keep your child forever. Hello everyone, I'm Naim and welcome back to the 5th episode of Thursday Terror. Tonight, we have a deeply unsettling incident from Pakistan, once again brought to us by Sarea. I'll be honest with you guys, this one is heavy. It's not just a typical paranormal incident or a ghost story. It's a tragic look at what happens when a young family is forced to live on bad ground and how a tiny brass bell becomes their worst nightmare. Now let's get directly into the story, but before we begin, sit in a quiet room and turn the lights off, because some spirits don't just want to scare you, they want to keep what is yours. This is Sarea's story.
Hello everyone, I'm Sarea. The story I have for you tonight isn't just terrifying, it's heartbreaking. In my work collecting stories across Pakistan, I often come across tales that are hard to classify. Is it paranormal or is it just something worse? The story I'm about to share comes from a woman named Maria. I actually found this story through my childhood friend Naha. Naha told me about a scary haunting experience that happened to her sister-in-law's family, but she didn't remember the full detail. So we went to meet her brother's wife to hear the truth. That is where we found out what really happened. A tragic story about a man named Farid and his wife, Minara. This isn't just a ghost story. It shows how a family was destroyed by something they couldn't see. It involves a house built on bad ground and a small brass bell that should have been lost forever. Let's go back to where it started. Farid and Marina's story began with a love that was difficult. They were cousins, and Farid had loved her since they were kids. But in our society, love isn't just enough. You need a good job. Farid worked very hard, and after getting a teaching job at a government school, he finally asked to marry her. Her family agreed, but his family refused. After months of fighting, they gave him a cruel choice. You can marry her, but you cannot live in our house. We have a property nearby. You must live there. Farid's heart sank. Everyone in the area knew that house. It stood on a piece of land that people stayed away from, even during the day. It was a dark place known for ghosts and bad spirits. But for the sake of love, Farid agreed. They moved in, and for 7 years, they tried to make a life there. But the house never let them rest. At night, they would hear whisper of the people in the hallway, but no one was there. Doors would open and close, footsteps would walk away from the empty halls. They learned to live with the fear, keeping their heads down. They eventually had 3 children, 2 sons and a baby girl, just 2 years old. And that is when the ghost turned its attention. It started with the baby. Every night, exactly from midnight until 3 a.m., the little girl would scream in terror. It wasn't just the cry of a hungry or sick child. It was the scream of someone seeing something horrible. To keep track of her in that large, dark house, Farid kept a small anklet with a bell around her leg. Its gentle sound was meant to keep them to find her, but soon, that sound became a nightmare. Desperate and out of options, they called the local imam. He arrived with his prayer beads and told the family to sleep while he kept watch. He sat on the mat in the center of the hall, reciting verses to cleanse the air. But around 2 a.m., the imam stopped reciting. The house was deadly silent. Then he heard it, a soft, playful sound coming from the darkness. Ching, ching. It was the sound of the bell on the anklet. The next morning, the imam didn't look like a holy imam. He looked terrified. His face was gray and his hands were shaking as he held a glass of water. He whispered to Farad, "Last night, I didn't follow your daughter's cries. I followed the sound of her bell. I heard it ringing from the guest room, a room where a child was not." The imam took a deep breath and explained what he had seen. "There is a spirit here, an old man. His eyes are white, completely blind. He sits in the dark and waits. He's become obsessed with your daughter. He isn't trying to scare her. He's trying to play with her. He loves the sound of that bell and wants to keep that child for himself forever. The family was paralyzed with fear. They wanted to leave immediately, but they had nowhere to go. Before they could make a plan, the warning turned into a nightmare. One afternoon, Marina was down by the side of a river, scrubbing clothes. The water was calm. Suddenly, the air went silent. No birds, no wind. She looked at the water, and her body froze. Floating on the surface of the deep water, she saw an old woman. The woman had long, wet gray hair covering her face, and in her lap sat Marina's 2-year-old daughter. The woman was stroking the child's hair. At once, the old woman untied the bell and gave a strong, scary smile. Marina screamed. She didn't think. She just lunged forward. She splashed into the water to grab her child, but her hands only hit the cold river. The vision vanished instantly. Marina stood there, shaking, wet, and terrified. She told herself it was just a bad dream caused by stress. But the next day, the bad dream became a reality. It was around noon, and Marina was in the kitchen making lunch. Suddenly, she froze. She realized the house was too quiet. The gentle ching, ching of the bell had stopped. She strained her ears, hoping to hear it, but there was only a heavy, dead silence. She dropped her spoon and screamed for Farid. They began a frantic search. For 2 hours, they tore the house apart, checking under beds, inside the well, behind the trees, panic rising in their throats with every passing second. Finally, Farid went towards the river. His heart was pounding. He looked at the edge of the water, where the tall grass grows thick. There, tangled in the green reeds, he saw a small piece of cloth. He waded into the water and pulled her out. It was their daughter. She was pale, cold, and gone. And when Farid looked at her small leg, his blood ran cold. The bell was missing. The sadness that flowed was not normal grief. It was madness that destroyed the family from inside. Marina stopped speaking entirely. She stopped eating. She would sit by the riverbank for hours, staring into the muddy water, singing strange, scary lullabies to a child that wasn't there. Her voice didn't sound like a mother anymore. It sounded hollow. Inside the house, the atmosphere became poisonous. Fresh food would rot and turn black within hours. Plates and glasses would fly off the shelves and shatter on the floor if no one was touching them. At night, the 2 boys would wake up screaming, claiming they saw a tall shadow standing in the corner of their room, watching them. Weeks passed in this living hell. Then, Marina vanished. She simply walked out the door into the fog and never came back. Farid was left alone in the cursed house, broken and defeated. He sent his terrified sons to live with relatives. Eventually, he remarried, not for love, but he was too afraid to be alone in the dark. But the story doesn't end here. 4 years later, rumors reached Farid from a distant village. People whispered about a mad woman wandering the streets who looked exactly like his lost wife. Farid went to find her. When he saw her, his heart broke into pieces. It was Marina. She wasn't the woman he married. She was covered in dirt. Her hair was matted with mud, and her eyes were wild and empty. And shockingly, she was heavily pregnant and didn't recognize Farid. She looked at him. She just rocked back and forth, repeating the sentences over and over like a broken record. "Take me to your house. Take me to your house." Farid brought her to her house out of pity. A few days later, in the dead of night, she gave birth, but there was no joy in the house. Marina didn't even look at the baby. She sat in the corner of the room, staring at the wall, humming the same scary tune she used to sing to the river. She was too lost in her madness to care for her child. Then things took a turn that didn't make sense. The phone rang. Farid answered it to hear a woman's voice he didn't know. The voice was cold, calm, and sounded almost mechanical. She said she knew about the baby and wanted to adopt it immediately. She had one strict condition. "No one can ever know who I am, and you must never look for us." Farid, desperate to find a safe home for the child away from this cursed house, he agreed. 2 days later, just as the sun was setting, two strange women arrived at the gate. They were dressed simply, but there was something wrong about them. They were calm. Too calm. They didn't blink enough. They didn't smile. They simply took the baby from Farid's arms without asking a single question or even looking at the child's face. As they turned and walked into the twilight, Farid felt a sudden freezing cold wind hit his back. A terrible suspicion grabbed his heart. He ran to the gate to ask who sent them, but when he looked down the long straight road, it was completely empty. There were no cars, no people, no dust setting. They just vanished into thin air. Farid walked back to the doorstep, trembling. He looked down and saw something lying on the ground where the woman had stood. It was a small, dirty cloth bundle. With shaking hands, Farid untied the knot. His blood turned into ice. Inside a cloth lay a small, tarnished brass bell. It was covered in green dust and dried river mud. It was the same bell that had tied to her daughter's legs the day she drowned. The bell had been lost at the bottom of the river 6 years ago. A week later, Marina walked out of the house and vanished into the fog. She was never seen again. To this day, Farid sits in the house and asks himself the same question. Who were these women? Was the baby human? And how did they return a bell that was buried in the river mud for 6 years? Farid's son survived, but the silence of that missing bell still follows them. There is no happy ending, just a lonely man, a missing wife, and a rusty brass bell that returned from the dead. This is the account of Marina. It is a reminder that some ghosts don't just scare you, they take everything from you.
We know the most terrifying part of this entire story wasn't just the ghost in the house, it was the ending. Those two strange women appearing out of nowhere, taking the baby, and leaving behind a rusty bell that had been buried in the river mud for 6 years. It leaves us with a horrifying question. Who or what is raising that child right now? I want to thank Sarea for bringing this heartbreaking incident here tonight. Now, for our listeners, if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you hear a gentle ringing of a small bell in an empty room, do not go looking for it, otherwise you know better what's gonna happen. By the way, if you ever heard a voice where no one should have been, or if you have ever felt something watching you from the darkness, Thursday Terror is always open for you. Send that incident to our email, storyforapocalypse@gmail.com. Your story might be the next one we hear in our channel. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and turn the bell on so that you never miss any of our videos, because we will keep uncovering these untold stories and we'll keep bringing them here. Until then, keep your doors locked and turn your lights on and stay tuned to Apocalypse. Good night.